some things to keep in mind as you're doing VLOOKUP. So there's some pitfalls to be aware of. So one, when you're looking up a table within a sheet that contains multiple data sets, you want to use what's called absolute values in that where to look range. Meaning, so like in this example here, I have this sales table, but this sales table is sort of buried within a bunch of other data on this sheet. So I want to make sure that anytime I'm using the formula to look up this table, that that range that I have in my formula doesn't move. And so I set up absolute values for this range, which is basically these dollar signs before each element. So I'm saying always look in column B, always look in row 9, always look in column D, always look in row 13. If I don't do that, I'll show an example here. If I don't, actually, I'll show an example on the practice once we get to viewing the example. But yeah, it's just something that you want to keep in mind that if you're looking up data where it has multiple data sets, you want to make sure you use absolute values. We can actually see an example here. I've got some Google Analytics data that I pulled in from my wife's website, Cherry Bomb Salon. If you need a hair salon and you're in Utah, hairstylist, go check it out. But I have some data here, and it actually has two data sets that gets sort of pulled in from Google Analytics. So I'm looking at landing page information, and then I'm looking at information by day. And if I was to say VLOOKUP this whole sheet, right, I'm going to also VLOOKUP this stuff, and it's probably going to throw things off, right? So in this scenario, if I'm going to look up, for example, just the landing page data, I need to be hyper specific and say only look up this range. Don't change no matter where the formula is or what gets moved around. This is different from Google Search Console. So the Google Search Console, when you export that data, all you get is just that data. So this sheet only has landing page data from Google Search Console. So I could say in my VLOOKUP, hey, just look up this whole everything in column A to column E, and not have to worry about making it absolute because there's no other data source in here. So Google Analytics data that I have in here has two data sources, so I need to be specific about where that data needs to go and use absolute ranges. Here I don't necessarily have to because this is the only data source in the sheet. So that's one thing to keep in mind. The second thing to keep in mind, so I sort of just alluded to this, but when you're looking up a table within a sheet that contains a single data set, you can look up the entire column in that where to look range. So I can have in here instead of B9 to D13, if this was the only data in the sheet, I could potentially say B to D, right? Instead of the actual cell values that I need. And that way, I don't have to worry about absolute values. I don't have to worry about formulas messing up if I copy and paste. I'll show you what that looks like here in a second. I can just look up those the entire columns. I mentioned this earlier. You're gonna always use an exact match to look up. I put in here 99% of the time, but that's just because there may be like one weird time where you need a fuzzy match. But I've never used it. You'll most likely 100% of the time use exact match and setting that fourth parameter to false. And then the first column in your range, this is one last tip, the first column in your VLOOKUP has to be the lookup column. So for example, if I want to look up Mary in this table, Mary, this name column can't be the second column, and then my formula is still looking at B9 to 13. The first column in my lookup has to be what I'm actually looking up. As this first parameter has to be within the first column of my lookup table. So something else to keep in mind if you there's other formulas to allow you to sort of go horizontally and look in between data sets to find what you need. Index match is the one that comes to mind. There's also now they just added in a recent update to Excel XLOOKUP. XLOOKUP is sort of a cross or a combination of VLOOKUP and a horizontal lookup or HLOOKUP or an index match formula. So you can use an XLOOKUP in Excel. It's not in Google Sheets, but you can use an XLOOKUP in Excel or index match if you wanted to not have to rely on that first column being that lookup column. But if you're doing a VLOOKUP, that first column has to be the lookup column or has a lookup value.